This conference will now be recorded.
Advi coming on.
Good. Good. Maybe Champ is on now.
Okay, I'm Champ. I'm sending you an email from my personal Gmail account, mascarame@gmail.com, because I don't have access to my work email right now because I'm in the GoToMeeting. I'm going to attach the document.
I'm already on. We're good.
You're on.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's good news. Thank you.
So he's the CB.
Excellent.
Indeed. Thank you.
Good. Background.
Will Abby's playing piano bother you?
I ask everyone to please mute your lines unless you're speaking. And Mr. Basham, looks like we have a quorum, so we can start whenever you're ready.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second virtual Seatac meeting. Hope everyone is doing well and all families are safe. You will see the things up on your page there. And when they call your name, please, as an example, if they call your name, say Bob Basham here. And I'd like to remind you all that Chet will be monitoring the chat room. So to raise your hand or put your questions in, that's where you want to do it. It's a little box. On my screen, it's a little bubble box on the top right. But I just want to let you know that we're glad that everyone's here, and let's get started with the meeting.
This is Nicole Mueller. I'm going to go ahead and take attendance. Mr. Basham, I'm going to mark you as present. Let's start with Chesterfield County. Mr. Jackson. Mr. Richwine. Ms. Robinson. City of Richmond, Ms. Erickson. Mr. Steele. Mr. Barnhart. Mr. Hill. Hanover County, Mr. Rasnick.
Here.
Henrico County, Mr. Barrett.
Jim Barrett here.
Ms. Lancaster.
Here.
New Kent County, Ms. Guthrie.
Present.
Mr. Moyer. Powhatan County, Mr. Fletcher. Mr. Sadler. Town of Ashland, Mr. Martin.
Upton Martin, present.
Thank you. Virginia Conservation Network, Mr. Gordon. Mr. Fisher. League of Women Voters, Ms. Cowles. Ms. Crutchfield. Chamber RVA, Mr. Easter.
John Easter here.
Mr. Mayman. National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, Mr. Minor. Mr. Johnson.
Present.
Richmond Area Bicycle Association, Mr. Vi.
I'm here on the phone.
Thank you, Mr. Vi. Mr. Burnley.
Ian Burnley here.
Virginia Association of Railway Patrons, Mr. Testerman. And Virginia Commonwealth University, Mr. Leonard.
John Leonard, present.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call. All right.
Mr. Chair, I would ask.
Yes, no problem. I was trying to click the little box, but at this time, I believe Mr. Lance is going to go over our regarding virtual meeting and procedure for electronic meetings. Is that correct?
Yes, but I think first we need to ask the clerk to certify that we have followed the approved procedures and that we have a quorum.
Nicole, do we have a quorum?
Mr. Chair, I can certify that we have followed the approved procedures. I'm going to let Mr. Parsons confirm that we have a quorum.
We do have a quorum.
All right, I will go ahead and read the statement regarding virtual meetings then. Since the governor declared the state of emergency on March 12, 2020, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, state and local governmental bodies have been providing for the continuity of government by meeting remotely by telephonic or electronic means in compliance with the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, the Commonwealth's emergency and other applicable laws, guidance provided by the Attorney General and their respective legal counsel. On April 22nd, the General Assembly approved a budget amendment to authorize all public bodies, including regional bodies such as Plan RVA and the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization, likewise to meet by electronic means without a physical quorum assembled together during a governor-declared state of emergency, as long as certain conditions are met, so as to provide for the continuity of governmental operations. This new authority is effective immediately. The bylaws of the RRTPO define a quorum of the body to be a majority of the committee's current membership. The 2020 COVID-19 virus makes it impractical and unsafe, even potentially life-threatening, for a quorum of this size to be physically assembled in one location, pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2, 3708.2A3. Further, the virus makes it impractical and unsafe for the public and the agency staff to gather in the same location to participate in this meeting. The health, safety, and welfare of our community is of paramount importance. Therefore, we have determined the appropriateness and eligibility to conduct today's meeting of the RRTPO Seatac electronically pursuant to the provisions of Virginia Code 2.2, 3708.2 and related legislation approved by the General Assembly of Virginia, and in light of the Governor's State of Emergency Declaration for COVID-19. The convening of the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization Seatac has been determined necessary in order to continue the necessary business of the organization. The matters included on the agenda address important, essential matters of continuing the work of government, and therefore it is appropriate to convene during this time. While we do not know the exact duration of the current practice of electronic meetings, we will continue to function in this matter until such time as it is deemed advisable to return to in-person meetings. RRTPO staff have provided notice of this meeting and the means by which we are virtually gathered to members of the public. Notice was provided on July 9, 2020 through posting on the Plan RVA website and distribution of email notification to members, alternates, and known interested parties, including the media. In order to comply with the provisions of Virginia law and to improve accessibility to the discussions intended for today, this meeting will be recorded. Audio recordings of the meeting will be posted on the Plan RVA website within 48 hours of this meeting. Any members of the public wishing to address the RRTPO Community Transportation Advisory Committee were invited to submit comments via email until the close of business 1 day prior to the meeting, in order to be reviewed and addressed during this meeting if necessary. Anyone participating as an observer during the meeting today may submit comments or questions at any time during the meeting via email at rrtpoinput@planrva.org or by using the online chat functions of the meeting platform. Those individuals who are observing by phone may be called upon to address the RRTPO Seatac with their questions or comments. All comments and questions submitted during the meeting will be reviewed following the meeting, and to the extent practical, responses may be provided or posted on the Plan RVA website. Does anyone have any questions regarding the process for assuring effective facilitation of this meeting or for how members of the public may participate? I will move then to procedures for electronic meetings, and the procedures for electronic meetings have been read in its entirety in previous meetings and is available in the agenda packet on our website. Therefore, we will not be reading it today. If there are any questions about the procedures, please reach out to us and we are happy to answer them after the meeting. So at this point, Mr. Chairman, we can move to item A, which is administration.
Yes, good afternoon. Please understand that these next two areas will have to be a roll call and vote. Right now, I'm calling for a approval and second of the July 16, 2020 Seatac meeting agenda.
So approved.
Who was that?
Upton Martin.
All right.
Second, Lisa Guthrie. Yeah.
All in favor, we're going to vote. Nicole will be calling us out.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The committee will now be voting on item number A1, the approval of today's meeting agenda. Goochland County, Mr. Basham.
Bob Basham, yes.
Hanover County, Mr. Rasnick.
Charles Rasnick, yes.
Henrico County, Mr. Barrett.
Jim Barrett, yes.
Ms. Lancaster.
Amber Lancaster, yes.
New Kent County, Ms. Guthrie.
Lisa Guthrie, yes.
Town of Ashland, Mr. Martin.
Upton Martin, yes.
Chamber RVA, Mr. Easter.
John Easter, yes.
NAACP, Mr. Johnson.
Walter Johnson, yes.
RABA, Mr. Vi.
Yes.
And VCU, Mr. Leonard.
John Leonard, yes.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the roll call for item A1.
Seeing how it's approved, our next item is approval of, excuse me, today's Seatac meeting minutes. Again, we will go through and I'm calling first off for an approval and for a second.
John Leonard, move.
Walter Johnson, second. Mr. Chairman, these are the minutes from the last meeting. Is that what we're approving now?
That is correct.
I do have a suggested change to that. In the portion that summarizes the presentation that Lisa and I did, I think it's on page 9 of the packet. There is projected revenues are listed. Okay, I'm looking at a different agenda here, so it's a different page, but right there in that larger paragraph B1, the middle paragraph there, the projected, those were the original projections. So I think we should say the regional revenue projections originally ranged from that, but will be reduced due to delayed start and COVID effects, something like that.
Ms. Mueller, do you see that for correction?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Easter. I will make the correction to the minutes.
Thank you.
So I guess go back to say a move and a second with this correction, unless there's anyone else with corrections. Ms. Mueller, if you would go ahead with the roll.
Yes, sir. The committee will now be voting on item number A2, the approval of the May 21st Seatac meeting minutes. Goochland County, Mr. Basham.
Bob Basham, yes.
Hanover County, Mr. Rasnick.
Charles Rasnick, yes.
Henrico County, Mr. Barrett.
Jim Barrett, yes.
Ms. Lancaster.
Amber Lancaster, yes.
New Kent County, Ms. Guthrie.
Lisa Guthrie, yes.
Town of Ashland, Mr. Martin.
Upton Martin, yes.
Chamber RVA, Mr. Easter.
John Easter, yes.
NAACP, Mr. Johnson.
Walter Johnson, yes.
RABA, Mr. Vi.
Yes.
And VCU, Mr. Leonard.
John Leonard, yes.
That concludes the voting for item A2.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mueller. Our next item on the agenda is the public comment period. This is a little different, but to anyone that's out there that can hear me, if it's for the public and you wish to speak, please unmute your microphone and say that your name, who you represent, and that you'd like to speak. Hearing none, I think that we can look to move on to item number 4, which is the Seatac Chairman's report. And I do have something to report to the group today. This past week, this has to do with the TAC, and let me read this to you. The Central Virginia Transportation Authority was established by the 2020 General Assembly and given the responsibility to develop transportation priorities and administer funds generated through fuel and sales/use taxes to project in the projects in the Richmond region. As part of that legislation, the CVTA is called to utilize GRTC and RRTPO to develop a plan for regional public transportation within Planning District 15. The current RRTPO structure did not include a committee specifically tasked with addressing transit in the region. In its efforts to support more equitable transportation services in the Richmond region, this new work group provides a forum for more transparent regional conversations about mobility and accessibility for all residents. The RRTPO Technical Advisory Committee established the Public Transportation Work Group at their July 14, 2020 meeting to begin immediate work towards development of a regional public transportation plan. They resolved that the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization, RRTPO, Technical Advisory Committee, and established the RRTPO Transit Work Group consisting of representatives of the following member organizations. This is where you need to really be listening. The list of the members are Chesterfield County, City of Richmond, Henrico County, Seatac, DRPT, GRTC, and Plan RBA. What I am requesting is for a Seatac member to volunteer to represent us on the newly established RRTPO Public Transportation Work Group. Would someone like to volunteer to be a part of that group?
Mr. Chairman, this is Lisa Guthrie. I would be willing to serve on that.
Cool.
Okay, Chet, if I may, is there anyone else that is interested in serving? If I may, Chet or Mr. Lance, I take it you would reach out to Lisa and let her know the particulars on that, if that's okay.
Yes, we'll be glad to follow up with Lisa. Lisa, we appreciate your willingness to serve.
Thank you very much, Lisa.
Thank you. Glad to do it.
Okay. Item number 5 is we go to Mr. Chet Parsons for the RRTPO updates.
Thank you very much. I wanted to just give you a brief update. Hopefully you've had a chance to look through your agenda packet. I'm showing the board and TAC meetings report on the screen. There were a number of TIP amendments that took place and were posted on the TPO website. The TIP has been updated since then. If you'd like more information on what those amendments included, you could be in touch with one of the staff members. You could also go back and look at the minutes from the policy board meeting of July 2nd. The update to our transportation improvement program has been completed. There was a formal public comment period from February 18th through April 3rd, and it was advertised according to our guidance documents. And the policy board adopted that updated FY21 to 24 transportation improvement program accordingly after the public comment period ended. We do have a new unified planning work program, which is our guidance document for staff that outlines the work tasks for fiscal year 21, which runs from July 1st to June 30th, July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. We are trying to be a little bit flexible with the work program this year due to all the extenuating circumstances, and it does contain some flexible time to be a resource for the newly established Central Virginia Transportation Authority. So we are, we want to be a resource. We want to be, hopefully we want to provide good data to the authority so that as they make their decisions for spending the revenues that are being collected, that they coincide with the work that the TPO has done and the work that you, the TAC, and the policy board have put in place to identify needs and priorities. The long-range plan is well underway. We have an adopted or an accepted long-range growth forecast analysis. This really looks a lot at census data and projections and trends that would go out to our horizon year of 2045. This will eventually be part of the adopted long-range plan, which will be adopted. Our idea is September or October of next year. If you would like to see the growth forecast analysis, there is a link to it in the agenda packet. New officers were elected for FY21 for the policy board. Patricia Page on the Board of Supervisors for New Kent County is the new chair, and Bill Cota on the Board of Supervisors for Charles City County is the vice chair. And they will serve for the fiscal year as well through June 30th of 2021. There are new TAC officers as of Tuesday. The new chair of the TAC is Nora Amos from the town of Ashland, and the vice chair is Kelly Leduc from New Kent County. And these follow the traditional rotation that has been set up and is in our non-binding guidance documents for the TPO. As you just heard from Mr. Basham, the transit work group was established by the TAC, and now we have Ms. Guthrie as a member representing Seatac on that work group. We're excited to get that in place. And the Smart Scale program is currently in application mode, and we are working on 10 applications for regionally significant projects that would benefit the TPO region. Staff has worked with VDOT Richmond District to look at what those applications might cover and have finalized a set of 10. Those applications are due now on August 17th. Those were backdated from August 3rd as the original date. So staff is working closely with our member governments to put those applications in place and make sure that all our T's are crossed and our I's are dotted. We are in a holding pattern on draft RSTP CMAQ allocations. RSTP and CMAQ are two grant sources that we use to help local governments and member organizations complete smaller scale projects, and we're able to apply funds directly that do not come from VDOT as part of their other processes. So we are still in a holding pattern due to COVID and other extenuating circumstances. We're expecting these funding programs to be released, so hopefully sometime this fall. We've heard from VDOT that it could be at the end of the calendar year. We're hopeful that it's before then, because these funds really do come in handy at the local level to put projects in place. At the same time, we are working at the staff level with Richmond District and our advisory committees to do an update to our selection guidelines, which is really the process that we follow internally to select which project applications for these two grant sources should move forward. So it's a prioritization process basically, and we're doing an update on how those projects are ranked and prioritized. We really want to make it more numbers based and less qualitative. So we are working through that this fall, and that's really going to this process update is going to piggyback the prioritization process that we're developing for our long range plan. So all of those resources really talk to each other from here moving forward. As far as current work efforts, we are well underway on our long-range transportation plan, Connect RBA 2045. Many of you are involved in many different ways. We do have one survey that is out now that hopefully all of you have gotten the communication about and have been able to pass along to your constituents. It deals with priorities, identified priorities for the region. And this is one in a series of surveys that we'll be developing over the next few months. The next one to look for is focused on vision and goals for the long range plan. So we're excited about this. It doesn't exactly follow our process that we identified last fall, which dealt with a lot more in face-to-face and community oriented meetings, but we're doing the best we can, and we think that some of these online survey tools are really going to come in handy to get the word out and get people engaged wherever they are. The Greater RVA Transit Vision Plan is moving forward, and we'll get an update on that. The trolley line trail study and the bicycle pedestrian plan update are well underway and hopefully complement each other as these efforts are being assessed by staff and our steering committees. The bike ped plan update will serve as will feed into our long range plan eventually. So a lot of the input that we're receiving for the bicycle pedestrian plan update is twofold. One, to get this plan updated, and to also inform the components of the long range plan. We have a Vision Zero work group that has been established, and the kickoff for that was held on June 4th. This is really a chance for us to take an assessment of the concept of Vision Zero and traffic safety on a regional scale, which is exciting because although the city of Richmond is taking a hard look at Vision Zero, we haven't really talked about this at a regional level, and it's something that we're excited about doing as we move forward. The American Planning Association Virginia chapter has changed the plans for the conference, which was scheduled to be in person in early September. It will now be virtual, and I think that maybe Barb, as she gets to her presentation later in the meeting, can provide an update on that if there's any more information to share. I did have a question from Champ in the chat to give us a thumbnail of what the 10 smart scale projects are. And I'll tell you what, I can give you a list of what those are, and I'll put it in the chat after we move on from this item, if that would suffice. And if anyone has any questions following that, we can come back and address those later on in the meeting. Mr. Chairman, are there any other questions on the staff report or our current work?
No, actually, Champ says that's perfect, and thanks. So next, we're going to move to new business. Thank you very much, Chad. Appreciate it very much. Folks, I do remind you, excuse me, I always see that in the chat room, if you look, those are already up in the chat room of the smart scale 10 suggested. So the thing is that just keep in mind that we're going to be starting to have some presentations, is that if you have questions, please type them into chat, and we'll look to try to get to those the best we can in the time allotted. So I believe our first person on the list is Tony Williams. Is that still correct? And he's going to be doing the Senior Connections Regional Transportation Coordination Entity Update.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tony Williams, and I'm the Mobility Manager at Senior Connections, Capital Area Agency on Aging. I'm happy to be here today to give you an overview of the Human Services Transportation Coordination Entity. For those who are in the Zoom portion of the meeting, my presentation is in the packet of Seatac materials on the Plan RVA website as item B1. So you can click the link and follow along with me on the screen, or just relax and listen. The purpose of the Human Services Transportation Coordination Entity are to carry forward the work plan as adopted and amended by the Hs Tce Steering Committee, to provide a forum for communication and discussion, to facilitate the sharing of information, and to inspire community stakeholders who are involved in providing transportation options to their clients. A brief timeline of the Hs Tce. In 2018, Senior Connections, the Capital Area Agency on Aging, accepted the invitation from Plan RVA to become the designated Human Services Transportation Coordination Entity for PSA 15. Senior Connections, the Capital Area Agency on Aging, hosted public transportation symposiums in the spring of 2018 and in the spring of 2019. Following that, Knowledge Advisory Group assisted us in developing a draft preliminary work plan, and that began in July of last year. The work plan was adopted with input from the Hs Tce Steering Committee at our first meeting on February the 5th of this year, which 40 participants attended. Particular items on our work plan have been moved out further into the future due to conditions brought about by the pandemic. We had our last scheduled meeting was supposed to be April 5th. We did not have that meeting, and we're in discussions right now as to when it would seem reasonable to resume. The core team of the Hs Tce, or we call it the entity, the members of that team are Patrick Hickey, our No Wrongdoer Services Director, Colleen Wilhelm, our No Wrongdoer Outreach and Operations Manager, and myself, the Mobility Manager at Senior Connections, the Capital Area Agency on Aging. Dr. Thelma Watson, our Executive Director, is serving in an advisory capacity. For those who can look at the screen, you will see a list of organizations that are currently represented the steering committee, but for those of you who are listening in on the phone, I will read that list. Shepherd Center of Richmond, Hanover County Resources, Department for Housing Affordability, RVA Rapid Transit, the VCU Urban and Regional Studies and Planning Program, Van Gogh Incorporated of Richmond, Goodwill Industries, Resources for Independent Living, the Chickahominy Health District, Peter Paul Red Wagon, Charles City County, Plan RVA, AARP, Humankind Ways to Work, Henrico County Advocate for the Aging, VCU Department of Gerontology, the Greater Richmond Age Wave, Hanover County Resource, oh, I have them on there twice, very good. Virginia Navigator, the Alzheimer's Association, GRTC, Chesterfield Mobility Services, CA Human Services, the Department of Rail and Public Transportation, Family Lifeline, DMAS, and the Longevity Project for a Greater Richmond. Moving ahead, the committee has established 4 work groups, and they are inventory and assets, and they're working on what's available, what is working, and what is not working in the way of transportation in our communities. The second work group being public information, education, marketing, and advocacy. And that is, how do we communicate with the public about transportation issues? How do we include them in the process? How do we advocate to our public officials and representatives? Work group is the strategic planning and asset development, funding and resources work group. And they are tasked with generating a strategic plan, a project budget and development, and strategic plan funding. The fourth work group is the technology work group, which is concerned with communication among transportation providers, investigation of universal technology to make transportation accessible and affordable to all. We invite interested persons in our community to be a part of this important effort. If you are interested in participating in the Hs Tce hearing committee, I invite you to contact me, Senior Connections. My email address is twilliams@youraaa.org. And also, any questions on this presentation can be directed to me via email in the interests of time. I have also included an executive summary, which is called the Human Services Transportation Coordination Entity Work Plan Executive Summary for 2019 and 2020. And I quote, "The Hs Tce is a joint endeavor by Senior Connections, Plan RVA, and community stakeholders to promote, facilitate, educate, and help to coordinate regional transportation efforts to improve the quality of life in the greater Richmond area and surrounding counties." Our May 2019 Transportation Symposium was held in Glen Allen. Community partners, consumers, advocates, service providers, and other transportation stakeholders met to complete an assessment tool called a Framework for Action. And this is a tool for communities that are working towards a coordinated human services transportation system. At that symposium, the attendees identified 3 primary focus areas to be addressed. 1, strategic plan development, which will include marketing. Number 2, a need assessment and inventory and/or list of assets in the region. And it was emphasized that the committee needed to employ a person-centered approach. There are some items below that are our work plan, that is our work plan summary of goals and timeline. Naturally, this has been adjusted, but from July of last year to February of this year, our first goal is to compose and launch a steering committee, and that involved selecting members for core work groups, the strategic plan, marketing, assessment, and inventory of assets. Item B, to finalize a draft mission and vision statement. which we did. To the right, you can see our mission statement if you're looking at the screen. The mission is to improve communication within the community for people of all ages and abilities by expanding safe, reliable, accessible, and affordable transportation options. We also adopted a vision statement, which is all residents in the region enjoy an enhanced quality of life due to improved access to transportation options. Items 2, 3, and 4 of the work plan are available on the website, but the second item from February 2020 to June 2020 originally was the pre-work for the strategic planning process. And that would be to identify target populations, geographic area and systems, create a glossary of terms so that we would have a shared language for our discourse. As work was completed to provide educational opportunities for learning with symposium members, key partners, and the public, and to create opportunities for person-centered thinking training. Originally, our timeline for April of this year to September was to develop a strategic plan. Those items being to review existing plans and establish guiding principles, to develop goals, strategies, and priorities, to develop a project budget and identify funding needs, to identify goals for centralizing transportation resource information, and to develop a marketing plan and public education plan. Further ongoing work includes streamlining the ride connection process through technology. The ride connection is the transportation department at Senior Connections, the capital area agency on aging. And we have achieved that. To expand existing volunteer programs and work to develop new volunteer programs. Obviously, this is on hold right now. To expand the Ride Connection program to include non-medical transportation, which we have done, and to continue to foster collaboration and provide opportunities for funding for project sustainability. To the right, we have listed the guiding principles and fundamental beliefs of the entity, which are diversity, inclusiveness, a person-centered approach, acknowledgement that language matters, inclusive of all people, inclusive of need, and universal design. Our commitment to mandate older adults, persons with disabilities, and persons who have a lower income. We have adopted 4 transportation A's, and they are availability, awareness, accessibility, and affordability. As I said at the beginning, we welcome input from interested person, and we are very welcoming of anyone that would like to participate in the Hs Tce steering committee. I am reachable. Oh, and there's a nice picture of our first meeting. My email address is twilliams, that's WILLIAMS, at YOURAAA.org. I thank you very much for your time and attention, and I hope everyone stays safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Nicole and Chad, I'm just going to make you aware, I can't speak. My chat has quit working. So please understand, I don't know if you see anything new there or whatever. So I'm just letting you know that mine doesn't. If someone has questions, please type in there or speak up right this second for Mr. Williams. Hearing none, let's look to go on to the regional bicycle and pedestrian planning. This is going to be presented by, Mr. Riggin? I apologize if I'm saying that incorrectly.
No, you got it right, Mr. Basham. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I hope everyone can see on the screen here, active transportation in the Richmond region. Thank you again, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to speak, and thank you to the committee. I'm going to try to go through this relatively quickly, just kind of a summary of 2 story maps that our staff has put together. Both of them are linked in the agenda packet. If you would like to look on, I think it's page 17, but I'll just kind of give you an overview of some of them. This is work that we're doing to accumulate information that will not only advise our update to the Richmond Regional Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan, but it is also designed to remain an ongoing project of updating all of the GIS and data from the Richmond region to help us advise, bike and pedestrian infrastructure as we go along. Like I said, there's a lot to cover in here, but I just want to give you a brief overview. We've tried to, map all of the bike and pedestrian infrastructure in the region. We've been working with all the localities. I'll be talking over some of this as it builds. This particular map has lots of different maps in our VCU Wilder Fellow. Dan Mata has done most of the work to try to get all of this information gathered, and we've got a lot of different photos from around the region, things like that. So it's definitely worth a look for you if you're interested in seeing this. And I do know that Seatac has been, very involved in both our bike and ped infrastructure and our complete streets effort. So thank you all. This is loading a little slower than I anticipated, but essentially, like I say, we've been working with each of the 9 localities to gather their bike infrastructure, their sidewalk infrastructure, park and trail infrastructure data, and then we've also been working with some numbers from VDOT on crash information to essentially try to track pedestrian crashes, cyclist crashes, and injuries. So this is finally loaded now. You can see on the legend there, the green is designated bike lanes, which is that's a growing number in our region. We've got almost 200 lane miles in the region now, which a lane mile would count in both directions. So if you had 1 mile of trail, it'd be 2 miles if it goes in both directions. Shared use path, that's that blue, the blue lines around. Shared lanes, which really shared lanes are, Shero markers you might see painted on the streets. They really don't have much power. That's not infrastructure, but it was just, showing those roadways. Paved shoulders, that, you see a lot of that in the Chesterfield area. in that southern part. I'm sorry, that's I need to scroll down a little bit to see that. But that has a little bit wider, shoulders, and then natural surfaces. That's more of your parklands. We could go through all of these. It would take forever, but I wanted to get to Ashland, which is kind of our microcosm of the region, and has a little bit of each of the elements that we're trying to track. As I said, we've got bicycle infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure, and then we also have some markings for future developments. And also I described that we have, the crash data, which fortunately Ashland does not have much to show for there, but it kind of helps us to see the patterns in the region of crashes and fatalities with regards to pedestrians and cyclists. As this is building, this will be the only locality I'll show you, so we won't have to endure this wait very much. Ashland has, of course, the US Bike Route 1, US Bike Route 76, the East Coast Greenway, all coming through that center of the universe. So we've got some of those greater regional, or even at those point, those are national. Well, gosh, those are national trails. Well, this is taking longer than I wanted it to, but well, I guess it's starting to come up now. I apologize for that wait. So, as this is building, like I say, we've got Ashland and all the different localities with the same type of structure here. And again, this is information given to us by the town of Ashland. The blue here shows all the pedestrian, the sidewalk infrastructure throughout the town. Bicycle layer here has, some of this blue is showing designated bike lanes, which we're still updating this information. I believe we're missing a couple, perhaps. The purple is showing lines within parks. Regional connections, as I said, US Bike Route 1 and 76, and then the East Coast Greenway follows US Bike Route 1 through the region. Future routes, which I'll just change this a little bit, that's showing the Ashland to Petersburg Trail, or the trolley line trail, as that hopefully will develop through this area. That's that little blue dotted line here. And then, as I was saying, we have the for each of these localities, we have pedestrian injuries and fatalities. As I was saying, we're very fortunate. There's not many in Ashland. All these little gray dots show, but this is between January 2013 and May 2019. We're working to update this soon. And then for cyclists, we have where there is one fatality within this, but these are crashes that would involve those folks. So like I said, we have that for each of the localities, but I wanted to go ahead and move on to our needs. Hopefully this won't take long. If it does, I'll move along. But we have, as a part of our bike and pedestrian plan update, we're working with that long-range transportation plan that Sula Barrial on our staff is in charge of, and we have been using a wiki map. This one's looking like it's going to take too long to download, but we are tracking the information that we've gotten through that wiki map on our Connect RVA 2045 map, and that has been tracked and added onto this map as well. That's any bicycle pedestrian needs for the region, suggestions that people have had. It's just our public, our connection to the public for them to give us feedback, and that's going to remain open through the fall. We haven't got a specific date yet for when we would cut that off, but the point for this is, and especially since we're not able to have public meetings, we're trying to gather as much data as we can and continue to track that. So this will remain open. You can see the links here to the Connect RVA 2045 and the wiki map here. we're going to continue to add those items to this as we get them. So I'll quickly show our complete streets map. Hopefully this will load a little faster, but I know that this committee has been very involved in our complete streets efforts. And so many helpful people from Seatac participating in those and showing up, and we really appreciate it. This time last year, we were working with you all, having some of our events, our workshops in Ashland, and so as we continue to work with Smart Growth America and that crew, we've developed the story map that's kind of displaying a lot of what we've learned for our toolkit. But again, we've been over what are complete streets and what, in what different ways, rural, suburban, urban, all of those different ways that you can use complete streets principles in those types of localities. I wanted to go ahead down to Ashland though. As I said, we had those workshops. We've continued to track some of the progress in Ashland. We did a lot of, had a lot of events, took photos and so on. So it's a very useful information that we put together through there. And again, through our connections with Smart Growth America, recommendations that we made. As a part of that, during this pandemic, the town of Ashland decided to close Railroad Avenue during this to give more space for the restaurants who couldn't have people go into the restaurants, for them to have outdoor seating and just using that roadway space, opening that to allow for people to walk through while the sidewalks were taken up in large part by the restaurants. I'm not sure. I believe that has ended now. I may be wrong, but the idea that carried on for several months there, allowing those restaurants to stay open. And this is a complete streets sort of it's not tactical urbanism in the sense, because the city or the town actually was working with these places to do this, but the parking to patio initiative, helped keep those restaurants going, and open the streets back up to the people, which is the important part. So regionally, we've been trying to track how to use a lot of complete streets principles. This will take a long time to download, I think, if I try to go through much of it, but I just wanted to get to this map that shows all of these different principles. This has been shown to the Seatac committee several times, and tracks all these different principles of complete streets and how we put them to use in each of the localities. So I want to say, if there's any questions, again, I'd open that up to anybody to ask, and hopefully I can provide an answer.
Phil, this is Upton Martin. The streets, Railroad Avenue, Center Street is still closed to traffic south of 54, so that the restaurants can spread out into the street and into the sidewalk for customers. There's some thought, and it hasn't gone very far yet, there's some thought of maybe turning that area into a pedestrian mall, which would sort of be interesting. But I'll get back with you if that goes much further, but it is still closed and inviting to customers for the Iron Horse, for the Caboose, for Origin Lab, which is our Center of the Universe branch for the beer parlor, as well as the street next to the library is closed to allow for outside eating for Trackside Restaurant. Just wanted to give you that update.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And I hope that you guys have enjoyed having those streets opened up, just to give everybody a little bit more space.
All right, Mr. Regan, hearing no other questions right now, if I may, I need to go back and take just a brief moment If I may, there's a few people that have joined after we had started, and I do need you to, after I call your name, if you would state your name and say that you're here, you'll have to unmute your microphone. Sarah Erickson. Sarah, are you with us?
Hey.
Wyatt Gordon.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, please state your name, Wyatt.
Wyatt Gordon.
Mike Testerman. Mike, you with us? All right, well, Nicole, I mean, you've got a couple there. Moving to next is to Ms. Barbara Jaycox. She's going to be going over the Regional Transit Vision Plan.
Thank you, Mr. Basham. First of all, can everyone hear me? If anyone is having a hard time, just raise your hand. I can see a few of you. I had to switch out to a new laptop yesterday, so still getting adjusted, but I appreciate everyone being here. Chad had mentioned the Virginia chapter of the APA, American Planning Association. It was to be in Richmond, and we will have a virtual conference instead in October, and we're in the planning stages for that. But the good news is that Richmond will host the conference in 2022. You just have to wait a little longer, and I certainly hope we'll be meeting in person by then. But I'm really happy to be here to talk about the Transit Vision Plan, the near-term strategic technical analysis. We had been scheduled to meet with you on March 19th to share with you how we did the second more detailed screening. Of course, that was not a meeting that was held, so we did send out a PowerPoint that had been prepared for that meeting. We can certainly go back and revisit some of that screening, but we also have since had a steering committee meeting on April 3rd, to which Virginia Coles and John Leonard attended. So they have been representing the Seatac meeting very well. We would certainly encourage you, if you want to take a look at both of those. This is going to be a very quick, high-level presentation today. And so we can go to the next slide. Just wanted to remind everyone that we are starting with the base Transit Vision Plan 2017 that calls for the 2045, the long-range plan. We're using that same vision, but what we wanted to do is look at what are the near-term opportunities in the region for us to start building that long-term 2045 plan. This will also become part of the LRTP naturally and go through the public engagement that we really need to take forward. But it has been a project that we've been undertaking for the last year with the steering committee and the Kimley Horn team. Next slide. We are in the final stage of the analysis. We went over the detailed analysis in the last presentation, and now we're into implementation feasibility. We gave the same high-level presentation to the GRTC board back in June 16th. So they have seen this and are using some of this as a basis for their own budgeting through capital improvements and their operating budget. You can go to the next slide. Thanks. You can see all of the study corridors. They're broken into the purple were the ones that are selected for feasibility. We'll share that in the next one. But we had 20-some analysis corridors to begin with, screened it down to 12 that are shown there in the orange. And then to the purple. The next slide, we can talk about which ones, the 5 that we're focused on. So we have and you can look at this probably better when you have the luxury of looking on your own screens. But Broad Street, this is the route labeled A that goes all the way out to I don't know if anybody can see my cursor, but it is our current route, regular route that was implemented through Henrico's initiative last year. We're proposing that it be studied to a further degree from Willow Lawn to Bon Secours short pump. D is Midlothian Turnpike, downtown Richmond to Huguenot Road or Chesterfield Town Center. West End South is downtown, that's E, extending from downtown to basically Regency Square. And then we have several alternatives for an airport route via Route 60 from downtown to the airport. And then Route 1, of course, the Route 1 South has been is in the process right now. The first year of its initiation by Chesterfield, but this would be the Route 1 North, extending it further to Parham Road, is what our steering committee has advised us is probably the most feasible and most likely near-term potential. You can go to the next slide. And these are the assumptions that our study team looked at in developing this cost analysis. It's you'll see high level, very magnitude of costs, like they looked at 2 different scenarios, a 30-minute, a 15-minute program, kind of programmed routing, a 7-day-a-week service for all the corridors, and proposed the corridor routes to be built, of course, using the current network. So we were looking to how could we best make a more complete network and more with shorter headways and 2 different options. And of course, recommending any service changes would have to go to the GRTC for approval and funding. We used their GRTC cost per service mile as a basis for the assumptions. Next slide. We're going to use just 2 examples to show you how currently Route 1 North goes from Chamberlain, Wilmer, and then essentially down to the transfer station downtown and continues 1A, 1B, 1C to towards Southside Plaza area generally. And what they looked at was the extension to as far as Parham, and that's in the second image there on that slide. And then on the next slide, it will show how those 2 intersect, corridor H with corridor D proposal. You can see that 1A, 1B, 1C, those different legs of that corridor H route that extend into Southside, and the proposal is to look at what it would take to get all the way to Chesterfield Town Center down Midlothian Turnpike. Ridership is indicating this to be a more near-term possibility. Next slide. And just to give you a grounding on the capital cost continuum, because when you see it, there's a really wide range of costs that we're talking about. So we looked at costs with regard to what would be required for basic revenue service. And of course, you need buses. And those estimates for the number of buses at $500,000 a piece can add up. And also there's lots of assumptions about their spare bus ratio and whether there's multi-routes that could be used for certain buses, and a lot of that goes into this discussion. Of course, we need bus stops, and the basic bus stop at $9,000 a piece, that starts to add up if you use the assumptions that were made for the analysis. Shelters, those would be determined, of course, on a corridor basis. Intersections, making them pedestrian friendly. And then sidewalks is a big item, and that's definitely a partnership with the localities. And that would have to be through their funding sources and or any supporting sources of funds that could help them bring about better connections for the last mile kind of connections and access to all the bus stops. Next slide. So we're going to go back to that very first example where we showed Route 1 North, H, the capital cost by component. This looks at the two different plan options, a 30-minute and a 15-minute option. As you can see, the shorter the headway, the more buses you need. The bus stop amenities, there are some basic assumptions that they use which drive those costs, shelters. And then when we get to the sidewalk, you can see the wide variation. If you were to put sidewalks on both sides all the way, and that would be on the high side, close to $12 billion. And then some of the lower cost, if you could call that, $6 billion of sidewalks. I'm just sorry Virginia is not here to hear this, because I know she'd be asking questions. Transit signal priority always makes it shorter and more efficient route. So those are costs assigned as well. So what does this result in? Next slide. For all of the A, D, E, F, and H routes. That's on the next slide. We've got some really high numbers. On the lower side, with the bare minimum, with the basic service of 30-minute, and the buses used very judiciously, we have a cost, so we're back to capital cost of $10.5 million to, sidewalks everywhere, and every bus stop has a shelter, to $118 million. So you can see these are really big magnitude of cost numbers. Next slide talks about operating costs. And this factors in number of drivers, etc. All of the operating costs, maintenance costs of the fleet. And the range is not quite as great there, from $8 million to $13 million. I think the operating cost budget, or the operating budget for GRTC, is the subject of their board meeting next week. And they've seen the same kind of level set. I know their staff has been working very diligently to get the budget out to their board. The next slide, implementation. How do we go forward? First, of course, we'd have to be focused on securing funds, and that's really important to have a champion for a route. It would be locality, DRPT, GRTC, and us working together, defining 2-3 corridor planning, and also combining the efforts with the CVTA, which is, of course, a parallel effort building from this. And Chet may be able to address that a little bit more. I see there was a question about that, but that, of course, is dovetailing from this effort to some degree. They will be coordinated, of course. Corridor planning, looking at more fine-tuning the bus stop locations, prioritization of sidewalks and intersection improvements, refinement of the service schedule, and the service between the proposed corridor and the existing routes. Then you have to buy the vehicles, and that's a long lead time. It takes quite a while, to 12 months to 18 months to get a vehicle, and then go, of course, naturally into design and construction improvements and operate the service. And the last slide, next steps. We have gone to the board of directors with this level of presentation. We'll continue working with them and working through the CTVA process. We plan to take it to the our technical advisory committee in August, more in a story map format, so that it can be, we can really focus on all of the different options and service plans for the different routes, and show that in a more vibrant and kind of useful scenario. We will brief the TPO Policy Board. Our plan is in September, and look for their approval so that this can be used as a basis for moving forward, both through the LRTP and to provide input into the CTVA. And I think that's about what we have for the presentation today. We do have additional details on the screening, but I can see you've got more business on your agenda. So I would invite you, if you have any specific questions, we'd love to chat with you one-on-one. Certainly are available to do that. Or if you have questions today. I haven't checked the chat yet, so anything we need to cover. But thanks so much for your time.
Ms. Jaycox, thank you very, very much for your time today. Again, if you see that there's additional questions, that I'm sure that you can get her an email through chat or call one of the folks there. The next new business is the election of the Seatac officers. So we have a requested action that is, action is requested of Seatac to elect the fiscal year 21 chair and vice chair to serve from July 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. The background on this is the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization, MPO, non-binding governance guidance document establishes the rotation order for the Seatac chair and vice chair. As the outgoing chair is representative from Chesterfield County, the representative of Goochland County, me, is next in line to serve as Seatac chair. The guidance document further stipulates that the vice chair may be elected by the Seatac form, the jurisdiction following that of the Seatac chairman, which under the order of rotation of leadership established by the guidance document would be a representative from the town of Ashland, Mr. Upton Martin. Seatac requested to elect the fiscal year 21 chair and vice chair to serve from July 1 to 2020 through June 30, 2021. I think that we need a motion, a second, and a roll call. Is that correct, Ms. Mueller?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Okay. If we have a motion and a second, please.
This is Charles Resnick. I'll make the motion.
Have a second?
Walter Johnson is second.
Okay, and we'll go through the roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can I ask a question?
I apologize. Could you please say your name?
Yes, this is John Easter. I just have a question. Obviously, I think the two people who are nominated are great. Be happy to support them. I'm just curious about the rotation. I may misremember, but didn't Upton serve as chair relatively recently of this entity? And again, I think Upton's great. This is not a comment on Upton. I'm just curious how the rotation works, or maybe my memory's faulty.
It's been quite a while, John.
I'm just showing how old I am then. Okay,
yeah,
forget it.
I filled in once or twice for Herb when he was not able to serve, but that was just a temporary fill-in, and that may be what you're thinking about.
That probably is it. Thank you.
So this is Lisa Guthrie. I have a question. So who would the chairman be from Goochland?
Ashland.
Oh, okay. Since we didn't mention a name, I wasn't sure if.
Sorry, Lisa, I said that's me.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Well, not hearing anything else, Nicole, if you wouldn't mind, you can go ahead with the roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee will now be voting on item number B4, the election of the FY21 Seatac officers. City of Richmond, Ms. Erickson.
Yeah.
Thank you. Goochland County, Mr. Basham.
Aye.
Hanover County, Mr. Rasnick.
Charlie Resnick, yes.
Henrico County, Mr. Barrett.
Jim Barrett, yes.
Ms. Lancaster.
Amber Lancaster, yes.
New Kent County, Ms. Guthrie.
Lisa Guthrie, yes.
Town of Ashland, Mr. Martin.
Upton Martin, yes.
Virginia Conservation Network, Mr. Gordon.
Wyatt Gordon, yes.
Chamber RVA, Mr. Easter.
John Easter, aye.
NAACP, Mr. Johnson.
Walter Johnson, aye.
RABA, Mr. Vi. Moving on, Virginia Association of Railway Patrons, Mr. Testerman.
Michael Testerman, aye.
Thank you. And VCU, Mr. Leonard.
John Leonard, aye.
That concludes the voting for item B4. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Champier is alternate for Rob. I vote aye.
Let's see. Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay, moving along. Next thing we have is Seatac announcements and open public comment period. Anyone from Seatac have an announcement? Hearing none, future meeting topics. Could you go to that, Chet? I know it's on the back on page 20. There we go with our future meeting topics. Does anyone see anything that we should really look to or would like to add?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, Champier.
Yes, sir.
We get the current Fast Act Transportation Act expires September 30th. We've got a new transportation bill that's being considered. It was voted on by the House on June 26th. It's before the Senate now. And I think that's certainly germane to what we're doing. So I would encourage us to have a discussion of that early fall to see where funding is going to be for transportation. Thank you.
Okay, Nicole, were you able to catch that? Okay, no problem. I understand.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else seeing anything? Yeah, I think funding is very important. Seatac member comments. I'll let someone go. If I actually have a couple, but if someone actually has any other comments, please, if you would speak up. All right, hearing none, my two comments. First off, I would just like to ask Nicole, and just for this, would you please, because we might have to be doing so, would you send me Upton's information and Upton my information just so that we have it in front of us? You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. Of course I will.
I appreciate it. The other thing I want to bring up to the group that I think is something that's very, very important. I know that he's not on, nor is anyone from Chesterfield, but I'd like to get your feelings. I think that I don't know that we could get him on the virtual meeting. I understand, but I really and truly think that we need to do something for Herb Richwine for all his years of service out of Chesterfield. Does anyone have any comments or things of that nature?
Mr. Chair, I certainly think that would be appropriate. I spoke with Mr. Richwine today, and I think he may have been reappointed. I'm still trying to check on that to confirm it. But at any rate, I think given his long service as chair to Seatac, we certainly need to recommend that, even if he stays on as no longer as chair, but as a member. He did tell me that he had a medical appointment today that would prevent him from participating in today's meeting.
Not a problem.
But,
So if you would, I was just going to say, well, you want to move, let's move back to September's meeting.
Why don't we in September make arrangements for him to be, in the meeting, and we will recognize him appropriately.
I hope everyone approves. If someone would like to make a comment or make another suggestion, please speak up.
I think that would be a good idea to recognize him, Walter Johnson. He's been really helpful.
Well, no problem, folks. Well, being nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
John Leonard, so move.
Motion to adjourn the meeting precedes all others. Nicole, do we need a vote on that?
We do not, sir.
Okay, folks, listen, I hope you have a great weekend. Our next meeting is September 17th. Be safe out there. And you know, if you need anything from any of us, just send us an email or pop us a line. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.